Whoa, guys, welcome back to the studio. Ryan, aka BloodShot Airbrushing, and we are back for round 3 of the Reaper Black Cobra full-on tutorial. I'm gonna give you some tips as I go and kind of give you some direction on how to use this airbrush to get something like this to look like something like that. Alright, guys, and what a mess I have left behind me. So let me tidy up. All these stencils will still come in handy. Today we are going to kind of be working on some of our details and blending out our stencil lines. And in order to do so, we're going to use more stencils. Figure that one out. Alright, guys. I'm going to flip you around, slap you onto the tripod, and we're going to get this project rolling. Check it out. Alright, guys, I got this propped up so I can work on it. It's at a good angle to where I can access everything. I know I'd like to be more head-on, but in order to get you guys in on this, I'm going to kind of have to be shooting from the side. And so when I was elaborating to using more stencils to blend out our stencil lines, this is one of the ones I use. He's getting a little limp there. This guy's been around for, well, I'm going to say years and years and years. He's even suffered some scars. He's been ripped. This guy's about to fall off. You can't tell. But it works really good. All these little jagged sort of cuts work great for when I'm dealing with bones. I can find areas that work really good to get these things stenciled in relatively quickly, guys. And of course my French curve, but this has pretty much, I don't know if there's gonna be anything I can use on this. It's kind of big curves. These are a bunch of little teeny tiny ones, sharp and soft. So this is what I do, guys. We're gonna tackle this hand, and first things first, once I have it to this stage, guys, I got my stencils, the same color I used for my stenciling, which is my blue, purple, brown mixture. Now for this one, guys, it's a little more on the brown side. We want to go a little more weathered look. So these are the colors, guys. It's my FW Sepia, my FW Roundy Blue, and my Auto Air Deep Purple. And for this one, guys, I'm using about 8 drops brown, 1 drop blue, 1 drop purple. Pre-mixed. Keep my life easy. Alright, guys, and now my paint is crazy thin. When I say crazy thin, I don't know if you realize how hard it is to skate paint on paper. Alright. Skating, spiderwebbing, whatever you want to call it. Very easy to do because my paint is super thin. But guys, when I'm laying down lines, I'm doing stuff like that. If I need to get in real tight, much easier to do two-handed. But that's what I'm doing today, guys. Just basically laying in lines, blending out what I need to blend out. And for those of you who are asking, yeah, this is the same needle that I bent in the hack video. Still works great, guys. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Alright, let's get on in this. So, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bones that I've got to make defined, and the best way to do that, guys, is to start using your stencil and start chiseling out some of these lines. And the tool I'll be using to chisel out these lines, guys, is my Iwata HPC. It's actually an HPC Plus, but again, I don't run that rear handle, so there's no trigger restriction, which is the little dial they've got built into the back handle. I just don't run that, so the restriction on the trigger is all muscle memory, guys, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But for now, I know a lot of you guys have been asking, so that probably means even more of you have been wondering. I run 40 PSI. That's it. That's it. That's all. I know there's a lot of guys out there that change their PSI when they get into the detail work. Nobody ever told me to do that, so I never did, guys. I've always just ran 40 PSI. Unless I'm doing some sort of a speckling pattern, you know, if you're doing some stonework or sand texture or even stars in a starry sky, then I'll crank that pressure way down. But we're talking like 1, 2, 3 PSI, and it's just enough to spit out some speckles, man. Other than that, guys, I'm running the 40 PSI, 40 pounds per square inch all the time. Alright, guys, so chiseling in my stencil lines here and blending them out. So as you can see, I'm just placing this stencil up against those areas that are already there and just defining the bones, hitting shadows to the bones that are below, and allowing highlights to appear where the bones are above. And that's just using your stencil as a shield to basically save those highlights. You see me going in with a Q-tip every now and then, guys, where the paint got a little too thick, and because I'm working with super thin paint, it doesn't take much, guys, to use your little Q-tip with a little bit of saliva, if that's what you choose to do, and just dampen that Q-tip and give her a couple quick scuffs, and that takes off a couple layers that you just put on. And this is how I do, guys. Just slowly building it up, chiseling out, adding a little bit more paint, Now when I'm using these stencils, guys, I tend to be starting my line, starting my paint on the actual stencil, and then just blending it out onto the project. So for the majority of the times I'm using most of my stencils, guys, I'm spraying more paint on that stencil than I am on the project, and blending it out nicely. And here we go, guys. This is where we are getting into the muscle memory, as I was alluding to a little earlier. Look at that finger. No, like, seriously, look at that finger. I'll give you a moment. Yeah, it's moving. You wouldn't believe it. That thing's moving back and forth as I am applying paint. So constantly pushing down for air, as you can plainly hear, and just micro movements of that finger back and forth, allowing just the most minute amount of paint to flow out of that thing. And this is the trick, guys. This is how an airbrush is mastered. Alright, and if you're having problems and you're looking at your work and you're thinking, you know, it's just too dark, or maybe those lines are too heavy, they're too thick, it's probably because you're applying too much paint too quickly. So back it off, man. Thin that paint out. You're just barely applying anything, man. As you can see, it barely looks like I'm applying any paint. We will speed this up in a bit here, guys, and then you can really see how the paint is being applied in real time. It's hard to see, I know, and even the way the brush, you know, it's not direct contact with the piece, so you're kind of always trying to chase where that paint is coming out of that and hitting the project. But this is how I do, guys. And this is why you will always hear repeatedly from this guy, take your time, slow and steady, guys. Apply that paint in light layers. It's not a race. It's not a race. The beautiful thing about an airbrush, and believe me, it is way quicker than a paintbrush, because the blend factor. So the way that I am able to blend from my dark gray all the way to white with just using that one color, you get into using paintbrushes and you're back and forth mixing multiple colors in between the grays and the whites to try to get those blends nicely from one side to the other. Not so with an airbrush, guys. This is why it is so awesome. This is why I love it as a form of paint application, because it is a lot quicker to get these things shaded and defined, and that's all I'm doing, guys. Just adding shadows to the darkened edge, knowing where my light source is. Bing, right there. And guys, all I'm doing is adding shadows, defining those three-dimensional shapes by the shadows casted upon them. So if you don't know how a bone rolls, guys, grab some reference. You will see in the next video where I am doing the snakes that I definitely use a lot more reference. I refer to it a heck of a lot more, guys. I've painted so many skeletons, so many hands, so many skulls, that I get it. I totally get it. So I'm not using any reference other than the reference that's been built up in my own memory from doing it multiple times. Multiple times. So, yup. Yup. Skulls pretty much pay my bills, guys, and that's okay by me. A little bit of skullduggery. Alright. So, back at it here, guys. As I've gone through and chiseled out, then I start bringing that brush just a little bit further back. And now I'm just adding some tones, overall tones to the bones that are getting a little further back, darkening them a little bit. And going back in and making sure that those stencil lines are nicely blended out. See what I'm saying? So that's what I was alluding to, guys. The trick about using stencils is, in the end, it shouldn't look like you used a stencil at all. It just gives you some nice sharp edges where you need it, just to help show where the bones are going over top, where the other ones are underlaying, and this is how I achieve it, guys. Just using a stencil to give me some shapes, making sure that I know where my highlights are, and just building up these darks little by little. Okay, maybe not so much little by little when it's sped up half a dozen times, but you get it, guys. Taking the time to build the definitions, to build your shadows, saving your highlights to give it a 3D effect. And then once this is all achieved, guys, you go back in with your whites and you just hit the tiniest little specks of a highlight to really make these things sing. And that's how I've done it. This is how I do it. I hope you can do it too. I know you can. Alright, guys. I know you can. Alright, guys, and as we motor through this, I really feel that you can get a better sense, a better visual sense of how I'm applying the paint, where the paint is being applied. I do tend to jump around a little bit and sort of work one area and then work the area next to it and then kind of come back. But that's how I do, guys. Build it up slowly, take a step back, have a look at it. Does it need to be a little darker? Is it good the way it is? And really have a good look at it. And I don't film that. I also don't film all the times I clean the tip of my needle. But I'm constantly doing it, guys. I'm constantly, here we go. That was a little edit because I cleaned the tip of my needle. And there's just going to be a bunch of them, guys. I just edited it out because there's a lot of footage to get into these little videos. And I know you guys want as much real time as possible. So here's a little bit for you. And notice how I'm still putting more paint on the stencil than I am on the actual product. Now, I need this to be 3D, guys. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that, but bam. And this will allow me to get that back lower jaw to have some tones behind it and allow the teeth in front to be nice and bright. Using the stencil as a shield, keeping in mind where the shadows go and how the teeth flow. So move that stencil as you need it, guys. And it's just the tiniest amounts of paint. A little more in the back where it's a little darker. But as you can see, guys, this is how I build it up. Now, for the bottom of the teeth, I'm barely putting any paint on the product. I'm hitting that. And you can see, look at how dark that tip of that stencil is, because I've used that multiple times. It's one of my favorites. So, more paint on the stencil than I'm doing on the actual piece. And this just builds it up, guys. Gives me some nice defined edges where it shows where one tooth is definitely in front and the other is behind. Same with the bridge of the nose here, guys. Using a stencil to get some nice sharp lines under the cheekbone. That actually rolls way back where the teeth are, giving some definition to the brow ridges. And using that stencil to push where I know I want some darker areas, I can play with those now and know that I don't have to worry about getting any overspray on the brow that I want to keep nice and bright. So this is how I do, guys. And it's just a matter of slow and steady applying your paint. Now, here we are just using that big cutout to make sure that that shadow from the cloak is blended out nicely onto the skull. I want a hard edge to show where that cloak is ending, but where that shadow goes onto the skull, I want that to be nice and soft. So we blend it out, guys, just like so. And then once you've got your stencil lines in there, then it's a matter of going back in, micro movements, adding just the tiniest amounts of paint at any given time, and just building it up nice and slow, guys. Nice and slow. That's how she go. What do you think? Is this helping you guys out? Do you have any questions? Is there something I just haven't covered up until this point, guys? It's a lot of information, I know. I hope it helps you out. But I also know I've been doing this for numerous years, and sometimes I take a couple areas of this for granted. It's just become second knowledge, guys. Not only do you build up the muscle memory, but you also build up the mental memory. It's a given. So I know there's some things that I'm possibly doing. Maybe it's the lines I'm applying and how that you may have some questions. But, I mean, some guys talk about dagger strokes, and I've seen a lot of different versions of a dagger stroke. I don't know that the teeth right now would be considered a dagger stroke, guys. I just apply lines. I apply lines and blend them out from where I want the shadow to be hard to where I want the shadow to be soft. And it's really, really that simple. And on the teeth, as you can see, guys, you don't apply a lot. Just a nice little shadow to that one edge, letting it blend to the forward edge, and then moving on to the next, guys. It's how I do. You know how I do. Alright. And I hope the results speak for themselves, guys. This is how I achieve it. And you can do it too. Just build up that muscle memory. Remember, it is the minute amount of paint that you are applying. Using stencils to shield to give you nice hard edges and blending out. And speaking about amount of paint. Alright, so fill her up. Give her a couple more drops of thinner to get the consistency that you're after. And then back at her again, guys. We're going to speed her up so you can really see how the paint's being applied. When we're in real time, it's so slow, it's so monotonous that it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing. Not so when we speed it up. And I want you guys to get the most out of this. And hey, if you are watching on your PC, and you got that little keyboard with the up, down, left, right arrows, you can actually slow this down with those arrows. You can speed it up too. So if you want, guys, you feel free. Slow it down as much as you need. Hit that mute button, because I'm sure the sound quality is going to go out the door. And throw on your favorite track, guys, and you can learn that way. I'm gonna bring as much real time into this as possible, guys, but a lot of it is just really doing the same thing over and over and over, and I don't know if I can just reiterate, slow and steady, slow and steady. You guys would think I was a parrot, and I don't want to bring back persistent parrot, guys. That hurts the voice. Alright, back to work. Alright guys, so as you notice with these little cracks, when I'm doing the cracks, I get that brush right up close. When I'm doing the blends, like right here, I start pulling a little further away. When I'm doing linear lines, look at how I move the position of the airbrush to where it's kind of shooting more down instead of horizontally, okay guys? So I'm always moving that brush to give me the best possible line, whether it be a tight line up and close, or whether it's adding a bit of a wash tone from a little bit further away. Or if you're doing a combination of the two guys, working a fade or a blend, when you're starting up close, and as you're moving away, you're bringing that brush just a little further back and just applying a little bit more paint for the blend. And I always err on the side of caution, guys, by doing light layers and building it up slowly. You can always come back and darken it. It's really hard to go back and bring up that area to where it's nice and white again if you've gone too dark. Now, don't get me wrong, you can always punch in little highlights, but if you've gotten an entire area too dark and then you go back in with white paint and then you go back in with your black mixture, it gets a little different. The colors, the tones, they tend to start changing a little bit. So again, some crazy detail lines, guys, just getting that brush real nice and close and just adding the tiniest amounts of paint. And you'll find when you're doing the more detail work, guys, it actually builds up on your tip. The paint builds up on your tip a little bit more when you're up close doing these tiny little details. And yeah, if you build it up a little too heavy, you go back in with your Q-tip and knock it back. Now, guys, when I first started out, I was not able to achieve these tight little lines with my airbrush. It was very difficult for me. So a lot of the cases, I would do the tight lines with a paintbrush and then blend it out softly with an airbrush. And I do that still, guys, if I want some super tight details. And I don't think I can achieve it with my airbrush, guys. I'll go in with a paintbrush, no problemo, and build up some highlights, bring in some dark lines, and then just blend it out softly with the airbrush. Now, here I am, guys. This is my Iwata HPB, which is a 0.2 millimeter needle nozzle. The HPC is a 0.3. I run them both at 40 psi, guys, and I pretty much run them interchangeably. I like to have one brush with my white in it, the other brush with my gray, and that way I can work back and forth and not have to worry about constantly mixing up new paint, new consistencies. It's just handy to have it on hand. Makes sense. But I know a lot of you guys may not have this option, so this is why I'm trying to break it down. Do your grays, go in with your whites, and then back and forth should you need. And hopefully you can tackle this in one or two processes, guys, without having to do a lot of chasing your tail. But it happens. Definitely happens. Happens to the best of us, man. Nobody's immune from making mistakes. Alright, and that's cool. Don't beat yourself up, man. It is only human, and that's a good thing. Alright, wouldn't want to be anything else. Alright. So as you can see, guys, with my whites here, I know where my light source is. Bing! Alright. And I'm just hitting the tiniest little highlights to make sure that all these little areas that I want the 3D roll around feel, well, that highlight is only going to hit the highest portion of that three-dimensional piece. Why it's called a highlight. Makes sense, don't it? Alright, guys, so trying to keep the highlights to the most forward parts of all of the little roll arounds of the skull. And it doesn't always have to be straight lines, guys. In these little tiny areas, it can just be a dot. In some other areas, you can do a line that blends out a little bit more. For the teeth, you're definitely going to want to keep it nice and tiny. This is what really makes these areas sing, is having the tiny little details. And as I was saying earlier, guys, if this is a little tough for you to achieve with your airbrush, go in with your paintbrush, start there, and then build it out. Here I am using a stencil because it got a little dark. So just slap that stencil back into place and kick in some highlights, guys. Bring that back up. Easy breezy. And speaking of teeth, guys, this is where I'm going to bring in the section BloodShot's Pet Peeves. Alright, guys. Please count your teeth. On a good day, the majority of us have 28. If you got your wisdom teeth all fully formed, you've got 32. Alright? No more. Unless you're a gnarly shark tooth looking dude, then yeah, maybe. But typically, for the most part, guys, I always do 28. I never paint in the wisdom teeth. Most people have them removed. Some people never have them at all. 28 is a good number. It doesn't overcrowd the situation. So this is how I've always done it, guys. And that's my pet peeve. Here's a pet peeve of my father's. Not everybody has perfect teeth. Not every skull has perfect teeth. So maybe make one or two of those a little crooked. Adds to the effect. I'm doing a Reaper. This guy is going to be gnarly. The last thing I want is for a big jagged tooth to throw you off. So I've got them fairly perfect and in line, and definitely over exaggerated with the sharpness. Make him gnarly, give him some bite, and that's how I do, guys. Alright, and that was all done in the drawing phase, and now I can just use my airbrush to just elaborate on it and give some nice little definitions, nice little details that really make it sing. And we're gonna blast through the last little portion of this, adding a little bit of highlight to the cloak now. Well, I've got the white in the brush. It only makes sense, and it really isn't a bad idea, guys, because it kind of helps to give you an overall idea of how everything is sitting in relation to one another, how the overall flow is rolling. And there you have it, guys. Details. It's all about them details. I think she's coming to life, guys. What do you think? Drop me a line. Let me know your comments. We're going to wrap this on up right away here. Back in with some darks. Again, this is how you do. If your highlights got a little too bright, go back in with some darks and just knock them back a little bit until you're happy. And you may have to do it a couple times. So be it. It is art, guys. It is not a race. There is no victor. There is no loser. It's just a matter of final results. And you yourself, mainly if you're being paid to do so, well, I guess your client. But if your standards are pretty high, I'm sure your client will be impressed. But you got to make sure that you're happy with it. So take the time. Don't get frustrated. Don't beat yourself up. Patience is a virtue, and it is definitely something that is required to do any art, guys, because it can be a frustrating process to try to create something out of nothing. This is what we're doing, guys. We are creating something out of nothing using pigments splashed through an apparatus that just happens to give us some nice flows, some nice tones, and some nice fades. So, the cloak, pretty straightforward, guys. It's going to be a black cloak, so I am going in and bringing my highlights. Now I'm going in with an actual black. This is not my gray mixture. I'm darkening some of my shadow areas throughout, and definitely hitting the cloak with my black because I want this to be, well, black. Blacker than the blackest robe, surrounding the blackest heart, engulfed in the blackest soul, known only as death. Well, I guess not blacker than, I guess just as black. And here's a handy little tip, guys. When you are doing any kind of clothing, I know it's almost too easy to be like, oh, here's a fold, there's a fold, everywhere's a fold, but go easy on the folds. Try to keep the creases where the joints are bending. There you can do some nice tight lines, but for the rest of it, guys, allow it to be big blends, big shapes, big fades, and it just allows your clothing to have a little bit more of a natural feel. I hope this helps you out, and guys, that's it. Going in with a little bit of white details. What do you think? Not too shabby for just some black, a little bit of white, and a little bit of gray, guys. And I will go in on a further video and do a little bit of paintbrush detail. She's not done yet, but she's pretty close. Alright, guys, there you have it. That is it for this one. I'm going to wrap it up with just the skull and cloak. We'll get back tomorrow, and we'll tackle the Cobra. We still have a sickle. We still have that card that needs some definition. And, glowing eyes. Alright, guys, I'm going to wrap her up. You guys keep practicing. Keep those trigger fingers nimble. And I will see you for part... Alright, guys, as always, like, follow, subscribe. Thanks for coming along for the ride. Cheers. And don't forget, for all you beginners, we still have all those videos and the airbrushing hacks. Plenty more to come in those series, guys. So be sure to check them out. Cheers.